What's going on, guys? Welcome to this Python tutorial series number 6, and today we're going to be talking about string manipulation in Python. So without further ado, let's start. Let's talk about concatenation. So this lets us combine two or more strings in Python. So let's say I have a first name variable, and I also have a last name variable. Now, we are tasked to create the full name from these names. So we need to somehow combine the rave and works strings together. And to be able to do that, we must use the concatenation method. So let's name this full name variable. And to concatenate strings in Python, we must use the addition operator or the plus sign. So let's call the first name variable. And this is going to be concatenated to the last name variable. So if we print the full name variable here, as you can see, they have been concatenated. But there is a problem. There's no space in between the first name and the last name. So to be able to fix this, we just concatenate another string in between them and then just add a space. So if we run this again, as you can see, we have a full name now. Alright, so let's proceed to the next example. So I want my user to input their own data entries this time. So we are going to be able to do that by using the input function. So let's say I want their nickname, and I also want their age. Alright, so as you notice here, I didn't cast this to an integer. Well, normally if we have a number variable like age, we usually cast this to an integer, but we cannot in this case. And there's a reason for that, and I'm going to talk about that later on in this video. But for now, we are obliged to give a message to the user. So let's say hello, and then concatenate their nickname, as well as their age, years old. Alright, so if you print the message variable here, and then give this a nickname, let's say Sam, and then 23 years old, as you can see, we have, hello, Sam, you are 23 years old. And this is basically how you concatenate strings in Python. Next, we have backslash special characters. Now, I'm going to talk about three of these. So we have the backslash or the escape character. We also have the backslash t and backslash n. Alright, so if you want to turn a special character into an ordinary character inside your string, you use the escape character or the backslash. Let's say I have a passage here, and this came from a novel, and we want to just have a dialogue inside our string. And to create a dialogue, we must use the double quotation marks. And basically, there's going to be a problem because in Python, we use double quotation marks to create strings. So basically, those double quotation marks that we are going to create for our dialogue should be just symbols inside our string and not act as strings. So let's say the boy said. Now, to be able to create these special characters turn into ordinary characters, we just add backslash before them. So we have that, and now you can actually put your dialogue. So let's say I want to have a toy. Alright, so if we print the passage variable here, as you can see, these special characters turned into ordinary characters inside our string. Alright, so let's proceed to the backslash t, which stands for tab. So this is very simple. So let's say the boy said. Now, if you want to just add a tab before the boy word, you can just do this by putting the backslash and t. Alright, so if we print this tab variable, as you can see, the tab has been added before the boy word. Alright, so let's proceed to the new line. So let's say the boy said. Now I want to make all the words in new line. So to do this, we are just going to add a backslash n and then backslash n here. So if you print this new line variable, as you can see, we have that. And this is basically how you use backslash special characters in Python. Let's proceed to indexing in Python. Now, when we talk about indexing, we are actually referring to the individual items or elements and the positions within an iterable. Now, actually, a string is an iterable. Now, let me give you an example. Let's say we have a name variable here, and this is going to be a string. Now, the elements that we are talking about here earlier are actually the individual letters inside this string. Therefore, these are the R, A, V, and E. Okay? And their corresponding places inside this string are what we call the positions. Now, you gotta keep in mind that everything in Python starts with 0. Okay? So, basically, the first element, which is the R, is actually in the 0th position. A is in the first position, V is in the second position, and lastly, we have E, it is in the third position. This is how you identify the elements or items and the positions inside an iterable. Okay, so let's proceed to how to index strings in Python. Now, there are two ways to index strings in Python. We have the index function, and we also have the left and right brackets. Now, if you want to use the index function, you're going to be able to get the position based on the item specified. So if you want to use the left and right brackets, you're going to be able to get the item based on the position specified. So let me give you an example. Let's say I want to use the index function first. Let's give this a name. We have IPOS. It stands for index position. So now you want to call the variable or the string that you want to index. So let's call the name variable, and then to access the index function, you're just going to type dot and then find the index function here. So in this case, it is here. So now inside this parameter, you can actually specify the position, or actually the item that you want to get the position of. So let's say we have R. So I want to get the position of the R, so that's why I specify that this is the capital R. Okay, now if you print the IPOS variable here, so it is indeed in the 0th position, which is correct. Now, for example, I want to get the E, so that's going to be in the 3rd position, which is the last position of the string. So this is basically how you use the index function to be able to get the position. Now, what if you want to get the item? Now, this is a more normal way in using indexing in Python to be able to get the item from the specified position. So let's call this item, stands for index item. Now, instead of calling the index function, you're just going to call the variable, and then you are going to add the left and right brackets. Now, inside of this parameter, you can actually specify the position that you want to get the element of. So let's say I want to get the E. So that's basically in the 3rd position. So if you want to get that, you should specify that this is in the 3rd position. So if you print the I item, it is indeed in E. Okay? So let's say I want to get the A. So I'm going to specify that this is in the 1st position. So as you can see, we have that A right there. So basically, this is how you index in Python. Next up, we have slicing in Python. Now, I included the indexing here because I want you to see the differences between these two. Now, when we talk about indexing, we can only refer to the individual items or elements and positions inside an iterable, while in slicing, we can actually get portions of items or elements inside an iterable, but we cannot get their positions. Okay, so let's talk about slicing. So there are two ways to slice strings in Python. So let's say I have a name variable here first. Okay, so the two ways to be able to slice this string are by using the slice function and also the left and right brackets, but instead of having one parameter like in the indexing, we actually have 3 parameters here. We have the start, we have the end or the stop, and we have the step. Okay? Alright, so let's proceed in using the slice function first. Now, whenever you use the slice function in Python, you need to store this in a variable first. So we have SL is equal to Now you use the slice function by calling its name and then add open and close parentheses. And inside of this, you can put the argument for these parameters. Okay, so we have the start. Now let's just say I want to have an output as war. Okay, so basically this will be it. Okay, so basically the start here, as I said, everything in Python starts with 0. So we should indicate that this is 0, and then the parameters is separated by commas. So you should put commas here, and then let's proceed to the end parameter. So when we talk about end parameter, this is actually the integer, okay, of sequence inside an iterable. It does not follow the counting rules in Python, which starts from 0, right? But in here, we actually have to start with 1 because that's an integer, the first one integer, right? So we have 1, 2, and 3. So we're going to indicate that this is basically 3. Okay? And then the step is basically 1. Okay? The default is 1. So you can leave this as blank, but for now, I just want to specify that this is 1 because we are just iterating through this iterable one by one. So you kind of just have that one at the end. So now you get the print function and then you call the variable that you want to slice. So we have name, and then you just add left and right brackets here. But instead of putting numbers inside of this, you can actually input the variable that we've created with the slice function. Now when we run this, as you can see, we have war. Okay, so let's say I want to get the orc. Now this element is in the first position, so let's say 1. And now when we count this, this is going to be 2, 3, and 4, right? So that's going to be the end, which is 4. So let's just iterate one time again. So we have the orc. Okay, now let's proceed to the using the left and right brackets. Now you can actually directly print this in the print function. So let's say print name, and then here we have the brackets. And instead of using separators as comma, you can actually use the colon for this. So let's just imitate this. So we have 1, and then 4, and then 1. Okay, so if we run this, there you go, we have the same, but there is an advantage when you use this brackets. Okay, so let's say I want to just get the whole actually I'm just going to get the work. Okay, so we'll just leave the s behind. So we have here 0, 4, 1, right? But in using the brackets, you can actually leave this blank if you want to start from the beginning of this element. So you have here. So, and then you can actually leave this blank as well if you have the default step, which is 1. So it will be just the same. So as you can see, we have work as well, which is very nice and very easy to do, right? So there you go. You have the slice function in Python. Now, what about we increase the step? Let's say I want to get all the elements, but I want to increase the step by 1. So it's just going to be 2. So we have here 0. Actually, we're just not going to put the 0 here. Okay, 5, and then 2. Okay. Now, what will happen here is it will skip 2 steps after it obtains the first word. First letter, or the first element inside the iterable. So we have the work that's going to be inside of it, and then skip O, and then it will get the R, and then skip K, and then it will get the S. So you're going to have worse. Okay? So as you can see, we've already done the slice function in Python. Let's proceed to string functions or methods. Now, there's a lot of string functions or methods in Python, but I'm just going to explain some of them that might be useful in simple programs that you might do in the future. Okay? Now, let's talk about len. Now, len returns the length of a string. So let's say we have words variable, And let's say this is my favorite food is chicken. Now, we are tasked to get the length of these string. Now, to do that, we can actually print this inside the print function already, but I want to create a variable for this. So we have length words, okay? Now, to use the len function, we are just going to call the len, and then inside this parameter, you are going to put the variable that we want to get the length of. So we have the words variable here, and if you print the length words variable, so as you can see, the string has actually 27 elements inside of it. So including the spaces. So you need to keep that in mind, okay? All right, so let's proceed to capitalize function and title function. Now, let's say I accidentally name my string as in lower cases, okay? Now, if you print the name.capitalize, you're expecting to capitalize all the words here, but there's going to be a problem. The only capitalized word is basically the first word, okay? And the rest will be not affected. So if you want to actually capitalize all of the words inside the string, you use the title function. So if you use this, as you can see, all the words have been capitalized, okay? So let's proceed to the lower and upper. So basically, lower function will just make all the strings in lower cases, and when you use the upper function, all of the strings are going to be in the upper cases. So let's print the name.lower, and actually let's just alter this. We have R here, then K. Okay, so if we print the name.lower and upper here, so you're going to be able to see that all of the words inside the string became in lower cases and upper cases. Okay, so let's proceed to the split and join. Now, a split function actually splits the string at a specified separator and returns a list. So let's give this a variable called full name. So we have rave works. Now, we want to split this because we want to get the first name and last name of this full name. So let's call this SFN, stands for split full name. Then we want to call the full name variable here, and then dot. You need to find the split function. Now, inside of this parameter, the default here is the white spaces as the separator. Okay, so here we already have a space. That's why we don't need to furthermore specify the parameter, because the default is white spaces. So if we print the SFN function, so as you can see, we have now a list, and we have the first name and the last name split into. Okay, so now how to use the join function. Now, if you want to join a separated strings, you use the join function. So from this SFN, you want to return the split strings into its original form, which is this. Okay, so let's call this JFN. So join full name. So there is a difference in using the join function. Now you want to specify first how to join them, or what separator will join them. So in this case, we just want to join them by a space, because it should be having a space in between these strings. So we have dot join. Now we're just going to call the SFN variable. So if you print the JFN variable here, so as you can see, it returned to its original form. Okay, so let's proceed to the last topic, which is going to be the strip function. Now, when we talk about this, it will return the trimmed version of the string. Now, trim version, what I'm saying here is when you have a user that made a mistake. So let's say we have full name 2, and he input something like this, which is kind of dumb, but it might happen, right? So we have Robert Allen. Now, this Robert Allen included many spaces in the left part and the right part of his input. Now, to be able to remove these white spaces, we use the strip function. So we have st, stands for strip, then full name, 2, dot, you're going to look for the strip function. Okay, now if you print this st, then all the white spaces have been gone. Okay, and this is basically how we use some of the string functions in Python. Lastly, we have formatting in Python. Now, personally, I know 3 ways to format strings in Python. We have the f string, we have the format function, and we have the percent operator. Okay? Now, I talked about the age variable that cannot be casted into an int data type earlier. So let me give an example why it is impossible for us to concatenate a string into another data type beside a string. So let's call this age again. So we have an integer, which is 25, and we have a passage here. And now this your age string is going to be concatenated with this int data type, which is the age variable. So if you do this, as you can see, it got underlined. So there's an error. It kind of expected that this is a string, but it got an integer. Okay, so basically it is impossible for us to concatenate a string into another data type besides strings. So if you print this, so as you can see, can only concatenate string to string, okay, and not any data type. Okay, so basically concatenation only works to string and to string. Okay, so what else can we do here if we cannot really concatenate string into to the other data types? Now we use the formatting. Now formatting lets us blend any data type into a string. So let's do that by talking about first the f string. Let's say we have a variable here. This is going to be a GWA, so we have a decimal number here, 1.567. Now, using the f string, we're going to be able to actually blend this variable inside our string. So let's say we have the string. Now, to use the f string, or to create this as an f string, we are going to input f before this double quotation marks. So inside of this, we can say your GWA is now to be able to blend this variable inside of the string, we are going to put curly brackets. Okay, now inside of this, we can actually specify the variable. So if you print the p variable here, so as you can see, we have the 1.567. Now, there may be times that you want to limit the decimal place of this variable. So you do that by actually specifying this inside this curly bracket as well. So we have the GWA. Now to specify or to limit the decimal place of this number, we're going to use the colon dot. Now you want to specify here the limit that you want to do in this decimal place. So I just want to limit this into 2 decimal places. And then here, we're going to specify the data type, or it is what we call the format specifier. So this is basically F, which stands for float. Okay. Now, if you print the P2, let's print the P2 variable here. So as you can see, it got limited into 2 decimal places. Okay, so let's proceed to format function. Now, personally, I use this function because this is more professional looking and more neat. Okay, so we have the P3. Let's say your GWA again is, now instead of putting something here and putting F here, we're just going to put curly brackets here, and then we're going to find the function by using the dot and then format. So as you can see here, we have the parameter that you want to put the variable in. So we have the GWA here. So it will automatically detect the curly brackets, and it's going to be inside this curly bracket. So if you print the P3, So as you can see, we have the 1.567 still. Now, if you want to imitate this, the only thing you want to do is to basically um, specify this inside the curly brackets, instead of putting all of the variables here. So you can just put colon dot to f. So dot format GWA. So I print this P4 variable. So as you can see, it got limited to 2 decimal places as well. So let's proceed to the last one, which is going to be percent operator. So before we do the formatting, we need to explain or we need to learn the 3 format specifier that I'm going to just specify. But there's a lot of format specifier aside from these. So we have the %s, which stands for string, %f, which stands for float, and then %d stands for integer. Okay. So these are just the most common format specifier that we want to use in the string. So basically, that's it. So we have the P5 now. You have your GWA is. Now, instead of using curly brackets, like the format function in F string, you are going to actually use the format specifier. So we're going to use the %f for the float. Now, after the string, you want to put the % operator and then put the variable that you want to put inside this format specifier. So if you print the P5 variable, so you're going to be able to see that this is more accurate than the rest of the functions. Okay, so we have additional 3 decimal places, which is makes sense because it is using the % operator. Okay, now if you want to limit this into 2 decimal again, so let's say your GWA is, we have the %f. Now, instead of uh, specifying this in here, like, actually there's nothing compared to this. So basically, we're just going to put dot to f. So just like this, but without colon. Okay. So if we print the P6 variable, so as you can see, we have limited this P6 variable into 2 decimal places. Now, it is not limited into one variable. You can actually have multiple variables inside of this. So when you use the F string, you can just put additional curly brackets, and then let's say we have an age, say age 3. So we have the age here, so you can print it. And then here, you're just going to add another curly brackets, and here, you just use the comma and then specify the variable that you want to put inside of this. Now here, there's a difference. If you use one variable, you just do this. But if you have multiple variables, let's say we have the %d, which stands for the integer here. Now, you are going to actually cover this by open and close parentheses, and then just add comma, and then add the age variable. So if you print this, then we have 3 here. So there's a lot of 3. So this is basically how you format strings in Python. So I hope you learned something from this video. So see you guys next time.